And welcome back to the cross-examination in court of the nurse Lucy Letby. Just as a reminder before we start today, Lucy Letby is currently standing trial accused of the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 10 others at the Countess of Chester Hospital's Neonatal unit. She has pled not guilty to all charges. Nicholas Johnson KC is continuing to cross-examine Lucy Letby, turning to the case of child M. Letby confirms there is nothing she wishes to change in her evidence given in cross-examination so far. Mr. Johnson says for child M, Letby, in her defence statement, said child M was, quote, slotted into a space in nursery room 1 which was full. Child M was apneic and it was not known if he had had a desaturation. A crash call was put out and child M was turned around in the incubator by a nursing colleague to get him onto a monitor. Letby added she did not notice any skin colour changes in child M at the time. Letby said in her statement she had written up notes on child M's resuscitation on a paper towel which ended up in her pocket and were taken home with her. Letby tells the court it would have been used to write up nursing notes. Letby says child L and child M stood out in her mind at the time as they were the first twins delivered where she was the allocated nurse. Letby agrees child M was not an intensive care baby and had been doing well. Asked if staffing levels were a contributory factor in child M's collapse, Letby replies that the unit was very stretched during the April 9th shift. Asked to clarify by Mr. Johnson, she says it was a potential factor. Letby tells the court child M had been in a corner unit in a full nursery, and as nursing and medical staff were very stretched that day, staffing was not at a great level. Letby says she does not know what caused child M's collapse, so rules out a mistake by staff. She says it is hard to say if staff competencies were a factor in the collapse. Mr. Johnson says Dr. Ravi Jairam observed skin colour changes in child M at the time of the collapse. He says, quote, because child M was darker skinned, it was more obvious. He said child M was pale with pink blotches on the torso that would appear and disappear. He said he noted the most obvious patches on the abdomen. Quote, I noted them when I got there at the start of the resuscitation. He added he had only seen that once before in the case of child A. Letby responds, I did not see anything like that. No. Letby is asked if the lighting was an issue in nursery room 1. Letby had told police in interview the lighting was, quote, poor in room 1. Child M was in a darker corner of the nursery, Letby tells the court. She added to police, quote, I do remember his colour being harder to assess as he was an Asian baby. Letby tells the court the colour change, if any, was more difficult for her to see. Mr. Johnson asks why it was necessary for child M to be in the corner of room 1 if there were 4 babies in there with a capacity of 4. Letby says there always needs to be an incubator free for emergency admissions in room 1. There were 4 babies in nursery room 2, 3 in nursery 3 and 4 in nursery 4. The court hears the neonatal unit was at effective capacity. The court is shown a clinical note by Dr. Anthony Yuko, made at 10:25 a.m. on April 9th. Letby says she does not remember if she had any involvement with child M at this time. Child M was not Letby's designated baby on this day. A neonatal schedule for Letby on April 9th shows a number of duties Letby had for her designated babies in room 1 between 9 and 9:11 a.m. Letby says one of the designated babies was not a low maintenance baby with complex cannulation issues and was on the ward for a long time. Mr. Johnson says Letby has an extraordinary memory for this baby, 7 years on, but not for child D who had died. The court is shown a 1.5ml bile-stained aspirate is recorded for child M, following which child M was nil by mouth and the nasogastric tube was put on free drainage. Mr. Johnson says at 3:30 p.m. a 10% dextrose fluid bag is started for child M. Letby agrees with Mr. Johnson there is nothing to suggest insulin was put in this bag. Letby says she cannot recall what Nurse Mary Griffith was doing at this time. Mr. Johnson suggests this was when Miss Griffiths was collecting a blood sample for child L to be, quote, podded and sent to a laboratory for analysis. Letby says she couldn't say how long it would take to draw up a 12.5% dextrose solution, which in this case was for child L, the twin of child M. Letby agrees it would have been after 3:45 p.m. that the process would have started. Letby denies that it was around 3:45 p.m. that she sabotaged child M. Mr. Johnson says the twins' mother said in an agreed evidence statement she had to be taken back to the unit in a wheelchair, having been alerted by Nurse Yvonne Griffiths, and she observed, quote, one of the doctors was pressing child M's chest. Mr. Johnson says this is another case where a baby collapsed when the parents were away. Letby says she was with Nurse Mary Griffith at the time of child M's collapse. Letby agrees child M recovered quickly following this collapse. Letby says she did not see skin discoloration and it was not discussed at the time. A colleague had previously told the court child M's blood gas record sheet was disposed of in a confidential waste bin. Asked how it had ended up under Letby's bed at home, Letby says she has never taken anything out of the confidential waste bin. Letby says she does not know how many blood gas records she has taken home. She says it has been put in her pocket and taken home with a handover sheet. She says she probably put it in her pocket and put it under her bed. Asked why, Letby replies, because I collect paper. Letby says household bills and bank statements would be shredded as they were there and then. Other sheets, such as handover sheets, were not thought about. Dr. Yuko's records on the resuscitation for child M are shown to the court. Mr. Johnson says the record is meticulous, including 6 adrenaline doses. Mr. Johnson says the data for the resuscitation efforts is on the paper towel that Letby took home, which Mr. Johnson says he must have had in his hand at some point. Letby agrees. Mr. Johnson says that was in his hand at 8:25 p.m. when he wrote up his notes. Letby said she had to stay late that shift for the handover and writing up medical notes for child M. She denies waiting an hour and a quarter to write up those nursing notes or hanging around to get the note Dr. Yuko had when writing up the note. Letby denies rooting around in the bin for the blood gas record for child M to take home. She also denies sabotaging child M. Mr. Johnson is now turning to the case of child N, born on June 2nd, 2016. Letby, in her defence statement, says she had never encountered a baby with haemophilia before, and no one on the unit seems specifically to know how to care for such a baby. She says she does not believe child N collapsed, and it was not accurate to say he had screamed for 30 minutes. She denied causing him any harm. Letby tells the court she does not believe this event for child N was a collapse which required resuscitation. The court is shown the nursing rota for the night shift of June 2nd to 3rd. Letby was designated nurse for 2 babies in room 4. Child N was in room 1 with 1 other baby. The designated nurse for both babies was Christopher Booth. Letby rules out staffing levels or incompetence as factors in child N's collapse. Letby agrees child N collapsed just after Christopher Booth went on his break. Letby denies she was bored or had time on her hands working in nursery 4 that shift. She agrees child N was in good shape at the start of the shift. The neonatal schedule for June 2nd to 3rd is shown, with Letby's duties for her 2 designated babies from 8:30 to 8:38 p.m. One of the designated babies received a 50ml NGT feed at 8:30 p.m. as they were asleep. Letby says that feed can take 10 to 15 minutes or so. She says she can't put a definitive number on it. Mr. Johnson says other estimates for this kind of feed has taken 20 minutes. Letby replies, I really can't say. Mr. Johnson says Letby was texting her friends right through this shift. A sequence of messages is shown to the court. The first sent by Letby is at 7:33 p.m, followed by 7:35, 7:58, 7:59 and at 8 p.m, quote, we've got a baby with haemophilia. 8 p.m, 8:01 p.m, 8:02, 8:03, 8:04 p.m, quote, oh okay, I'll have to Google it later lol, don't know much about it. 8:06 p.m, 8:11 p.m, quote, complex condition, Yeah, 50-50 chance antenatally. Nicholas Johnson. That is where you got the answer from? Dr. Google? Letby replies, no, 50-50 is something staff would know. Messages are sent by Letby at 8:26 p.m. Quote, FFS, Mel asking me how to make up 12.5%. Letby said she was shocked that a Band 6 colleague was asking her how to make up such a solution when she could have looked for herself. 8:29 p.m. Quote, no, I've passed her folder, but now asking if can run via cannula. She needs to look herself. Letby says she was not happy with Mel. Another message is sent from Letby at 8:29 p.m, 8:31 p.m, 8:32 p.m and 8:34 p.m. Letby is asked how she can feed a baby at 8:30 p.m. when she was also texting. Letby replies, you can't. Letby denies feeding the baby very quickly by putting the plunger on the end. Another message is sent from Letby at 8:38 p.m. Quote, had a strange message from doctor earlier. Mr. Johnson asks if Letby's nursing colleague was implying Letby and the doctor were in a relationship. Letby says she does not know. Letby's colleague sent two messages. Quote, did you? Saying what? Go commando? Laughing emoji. Letby is asked by Mr. Johnson if she knows what the implication of go commando means. Letby replies, I don't know what was meant. I can't say right now. Nicholas Johnson. Do you think this was an army reference, being from Hereford? Letby replies, I don't know. The messages are sent by Letby at 8:39, 8:40, 8:41, 8:43 p.m, where she states, quote, do you think he's being odd? 8:44 p.m, shut up. 8:44 p.m, I don't flirt with him. The text message conversation is shown to the court. It starts with Lucy Letby. Had strange message from colleague earlier. Colleague, did you? Saying what? Letby had replied at 8:39 p.m. with 4 laughing emojis, and then states the following. Asking when I was working next week as wants to talk to me about something. Has a favour to ask? Colleague replies, think he likes you too. Did you not ask what it was? Letby replies, no, just said when I was working, and he said he wants my opinion on something. Colleague replies, Letby then responds, do you think he's being odd? The colleague then replies, thought as flirty as you. Letby replies, shut up. The colleague responds, what? Letby replies, I don't flirt with him. The colleague says, okay. Letby then responds, certainly don't fancy him, haha, just a nice guy. Colleague then replies, okay. Mr. Johnson says Letby was texting non-stop in the nursery room. Letby says the feed must have happened at a different time. She says she cannot answer when. She denies pushing it through the feed. Mr. Johnson says child N collapsed at 1 a.m. Christopher Booth noted, one episode whilst I was on my break, whereby infant was crying ++ and not settling. He became dusky in colour, desaturating to 40s, responded to facial oxygen within 1 to 2 minutes. Crying subsided within approximately 30 minutes and colour returned to normal. Letby tells the court this was not a collapse as facial oxygen was all that was required, not resuscitation. Mr. Johnson turns to the second set of events for child N on June the 15th. The plan was for child N to go home that week. Letby agrees he only needed phototherapy at this stage. A feeding chart is shown for child N, who was being fed mostly expressed breast milk. Child N's mother had visited on the morning of June the 14th and in the evening at 5:15 p.m. Child N had taken a 60ml bottle feed. Letby agrees with Mr. Johnson this was a very good sign. Mr. Johnson suggests Letby did something to destabilise child N before the end of her day shift. Letby responds, no, I did not. Letby says it was a coincidence child N was, according to the nursing notes that night, very unsettled early part of night with observations of mottling. Letby is asked about a message sent by a nursing colleague at 5:26 a.m. which said, quote, baby N screened, looks like shit. Letby responded, oh no. Letby denies she saw this as an opportunity to sabotage child N during the day shift. Quote, no, that's not what happened. Letby messaged a doctor colleague at 6:04 a.m. on June 15th, quote, "Wonder if I'll find my way back into one today then." This is in response to his message at 5:53 a.m, which begins, quote, "What a chaotic 7 hours. Sorry, I may have failed NICU. Have a good breakfast. I think your day may be busy." Swipe data shows that Letby is on the neonatal unit at 7:12 a.m. Child N desaturated 3 minutes later and was crying. Letby says she does not recall Child N crying. She says at the time she was in the doorway talking to Jennifer Jones-Key, her friend, when the alarm for Child N went off. Letby says it was very busy and a lot of intervention was needed for Child N after he collapsed. She does not cite staffing levels as a contributing factor for the collapse or a mistake by medical staff. Letby says she does not know if issues with intubating Child N were a factor and does not know what caused Child N to collapse. She denies setting up Child N to collapse overnight. Letby, in her defence statement, said she had gone to nursery room 3 not to see Child N specifically, but to speak to Jennifer Jones-Key, her friend. She said Child N was blue and not breathing. She shouted for a doctor colleague to assist and Neopuff breathing assistance was applied. Letby is asked about the part where she said, quote, "Jennifer and I were at the doorway." Letby says she meant only she was at the doorway and Jennifer Jones-Key was in the nursery room. Letby, in a Facebook message to a colleague timed at 7:12 p.m, said, quote, "No repeat today, I've escaped being in one, back in 3. Mr. Johnson says Letby had gone into room 3, as she knew by that point she was designated babies for that room. Letby says she had gone to see her friend. Letby denies sabotaging Child N. Letby agrees it was a serious event which happened within a minute or two of her entering the room. Mr. Johnson asks if it was bad luck. Letby replies, yes. Mr. Johnson asks Letby when blood was seen orally on Child N. Letby replies, the only time definitively she recalled that was at 3 p.m. She says that is on her memory sitting here now. Mr. Johnson says if she had recorded blood observations at the time, will she accept that now? Letby says she would, although it may have been based on what other people had informed her at the time. Mr. Johnson says the one who would have informed her would have been the doctor colleague she, quote, loved as a friend. Letby's nursing note states, infant transferred to nursery 1 on handover, mottled, desaturating, requiring Neopuff and oxygen. Letby says both she and Jennifer Jones-Key had gone over to Child N at the time of desaturation. Mr. Johnson says Letby was hoping to create the impression on the nursing notes that the problems for Child N had happened before the handover. Letby replies, no, I disagree. Letby tells the court she had taken over Child N's care from 7:30 a.m. Letby's note, written at 1:53 to 2:10 p.m, adds, quote, unable to intubate, fresh blood noted in mouth and yielded via suction ++. Letby says the 3 p.m. blood observation was the first one she could definitively remember. Mr. Johnson says this note is a good hour before that observation. Letby denies Child N was bleeding from when she first got involved that day. Letby says she knows there was blood recorded prior to 3 p.m. Mr. Johnson says the doctor colleague recalled in evidence seeing blood before the intubation process at 8 a.m. Benjamin Myers, KC, for the defence, rises to say that in cross-examination the doctor colleague did not rule out the possibility that the blood was present after the attempt to intubate. Mr. Johnson says there was an attempt to intubate at 8 a.m. Letby agrees. Letby also agrees with the observation there was swelling at the back of Child M's throat. She says she cannot comment further on what the doctor colleague saw. Letby recorded in her notes, written at 1:53 p.m. retrospectively, unable to intubate, fresh blood noted in mouth and yielded via suction ++. Mr. Johnson says the doctors could not see because of the blood. Letby says she cannot say what doctors observed. Letby agrees that evidence from Professor Sally Kinsey ruled out spontaneous hemorrhage for Child M at this time. Letby is asked about family communication with Child N's parents. A note by Letby at the time, quote, parents were contacted by SN Butterworth during intubation. Both mobile phones switched off and no answer on landline. Message left. Call returned shortly after and parents were asked to attend, have been present since. Both understandably upset. Agreed evidence said Child N's mother had said Lucy Letby had been in contact with them. Letby says, quote, "It's a difference in recollection." Mr. Johnson says this is agreed evidence. It's the truth. He says Letby's note is a lie. Letby replies, "No, it's not." The mother recalled Child N, quote, "had a bleed and was unwell," and said Letby had informed the parents of this. Letby replies, "No, I disagree." Nicholas Johnson, "But it's agreed evidence." Letby replies, "Well, I disagree with it now." Mr. Johnson says this is another account from a parent which Letby says is untrue. Mr. Johnson says Letby has been firing out post-it notes from the doc during the trial but had not raised this issue at the time. Letby replies, "I'm not sure." Nicholas Johnson, "Is the answer no?" Letby replies, "It's not something I raised with my legal team. I don't want to comment on what's ifs and buts." Mr. Johnson says Letby interrupted when the mother of child E&F gave evidence to say she couldn't hear and wanted to leave the courtroom when a doctor colleague began to give evidence. Letby replies, "Yes, because I felt unwell." Mr. Johnson replies, No, adding it was because it was her boyfriend who was giving evidence. Letby replies, "That's not fair." Mr. Myers rises to say the line of questioning is inappropriate and asks for the opportunity to consider the issue raised of a dispute in agreed evidence. Letby adds she did not make the phone call to Child N's parents and denies making false entries in the paperwork. An intensive care chart is shown for Child N on June 15th, saying at 10 a.m, quote, 1 ml fresh blood. Letby says she cannot say if it was a vomit or aspirate. The note is written in Letby's handwriting. Letby is asked what she did about it. Letby replies, "I cannot say, right now." Mr. Johnson asks what would Letby do if fresh blood was observed in Child N's mouth. Letby replies, "I don't know if it was in the mouth." Letby adds such an observation would have been escalated, but she does not know who to. Mr. Johnson says there is no record of it being escalated. Letby agrees there is no written record, but it may have been verbally escalated. She says 1 ml of fresh blood is not normal, but not a life-threatening event. Mr. Johnson says for a baby with haemophilia, it was serious. Letby says it would be a concern and would be escalated. A doctor who was on the ward does not record the bleed during the ward round, the court is told. Mr. Johnson says Letby has invented the blood reading for 10 a.m. Letby replies, "I disagree." Mr. Johnson suggests it was all designed to give an ongoing impression for a child with haemophilia. Letby disagrees. A Facebook message from Letby is sent to a doctor colleague at 11:29 a.m. on June 15th. Quote, "Small amounts of blood from mouth and 1 ml from NG. Looks like pulmonary bleed on X-ray. Given factor 8, wait and see. Apneas have improved and gas is good. Colour and perfusion still not great. If deteriorates, we'll try to intubate." The X-ray report ruled out a pulmonary bleed. Letby says this report came sometime later. Mr. Johnson suggests either there wasn't a problem at all, that Letby was making evidence up, or Letby was causing the problem. Letby disagrees. Mr. Johnson says a statement from the parent of Child N said the collapse was so serious a priest was offered. Mr. Johnson says this collapse must have been the one at 2:50 p.m. Letby noted, quote, "Approximately 14:50 infant became apneic with desaturation to 44%. Fresh blood noted from mouth and 3 ml blood aspirated from NG tube. Doctors crash called." Nicholas Johnson, "What had you done to cause this in Child N?" Letby replies, "I hadn't done anything." Letby denies shoving a foreign object down Child N's throat. Letby replies, "Absolutely not." Nicholas Johnson, "It's all your work, isn't it?" Letby replies, "No, it's not at all." Letby agrees she was agitated by the need for assistance from Alderhay as she had not known a case before of people coming from another hospital to assist. Nicholas Johnson, "Do you remember saying, "Who are these people? Who are these people?" Letby replies, "Yes, because I had never experienced who these people were. It was a completely new experience." Child N later collapsed once more. She denies using the doctors being in a huddle as an opportunity to try and kill Child N again.